So on my very far right, we have Jon Kershaw from PhD's Manchester office here. You've been MD since 2017, is that correct? Prior to that, he was head of strategy at Havas Media in London and strategy director for Cara. With over 18 years experience in the business, you know what you're talking about there. Next to Jon, we have Laura Russell. Laura joined Birmingham in the summer of 2014 and is integral in the development of the team's strategic media planning capabilities and works on a variety of clients there. Then we have Nik. Nik has only over 10 years' experience in the industry, supporting and transforming entertainment broadcasters first and foremost, and improving advertiser businesses' performance through collaboration and entertainment formats. And here in Manchester, he leads the Story Labs Northern office. And then directly to my right, I'm losing my papers here, we have Emma Slater. With over 25 years' experience, Emma is responsible for growth and development of Wavemaker's clients and people, with a passion that's in uncovering the human motivations that drive customers and journeys. Now, at the end of each of their 3 minutes, and we're going to be really strict with your 3 minutes, I don't know whether Frank will quite cut your microphone off, but hold that thought is all I'm going to tell you on that. I'm going to ask each of you a question. It's exactly the same question for fairness. So over to you, Jon.
Thank you.
I think your time doesn't start till you actually get to the lectern.
Let me get there.
Yeah, it's when you start speaking, I think.
We off? So, hello. This isn't the first time people have attempted to predict the future of news, of course. There was a really fascinating article in the Independent in 2006 on the future of newspapers. And this is a comment from the ex-editor of The Mirror, which I think goes to prove you should never listen to anything that Piers Morgan says. And that predictions are very difficult, especially if they're about the future. So let's see if we can do any better in 2018. What is the future of news? I think we should ask ourselves two fundamental questions. What form will it take, and who's going to pay for it? So first, form. It's not a new concept, but I think it's useful to think in terms of fast and slow journalism. There'll always be a need for information to be distributed quickly, particularly commoditized facts, such as financial market information, sports results, breaking news events, and social media are great at distributing information quickly. But it feels to me like we've got access to more information than ever before, and yet we've never been less informed about the things that matter. So beyond speed, the other dimension that news brands can compete on is depth. As an example, The Guardian recently launched a new podcast called Today in Focus, which takes just one topic each day and explores it in detail for 20 minutes. And we're seeing the creation of entirely new organisations like Tortoise Media, which promises to bring you not breaking news, but what's driving the news, funded by a membership model. Which brings us to the thorny issue of who's going to pay for all of this. The general assumption, even 5 years ago, was that nobody would pay for journalism in the future. But happily, that's not proven to be the case. Over 1 million people have contributed to The Guardian over the last 3 years, either through monthly subscriptions or through a one-off donation. That's 1 million people paying for something they could actually have accessed for free. And advertisers still want the reach and impact that news brands can deliver. And I predict a return to more contextual advertising as we relearn the relationship between quality and value. Or you need a rich owner. So before Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post in 2013, he asked himself two questions. Is it an important institution? And am I optimistic about its future? Now, of course, news brands are important institutions in our public life. And if a businessman as savvy as Jeff Bezos is optimistic about their future, I think we should be too. So if we return to that article from the Independent of 2006, I prefer Alan Rusbridge's view. Back then, he said, I feel broadly optimistic about the future of news. And in 2018, so do I. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jon. So the question is, when you started thinking about the future of news, what was the hardest bit about the challenge? Let me set you.
Brevity. It's such a massive topic, and it's something I'm genuinely, personally, really interested in. The hardest task actually was to order my thoughts and to condense that into 3 minutes. Could quite easily have gone on for half an hour.
Yeah, we were a bit tough there, I have to say. Brilliant. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Laura?
Okay. Hello, everyone. So, there's a wake-up call from a new generation, a generation of awareness, conscience, and relative maturity. This has been partly brought about by the connected world that we're now living in, but also as a result of the political, environmental, and economic changes and failures of previous generations. News in all its form has played a key role in this, and at the moment we're asking ourselves questions about our relationship with it, how we consume it, the echo chambers we create with social media, filters and algorithms, and the way we trust it, fake news. News in its original form existed in an isolated world. It was functional and infrequent, but in today's connected society, we are constantly bombarded with news, some reliable and some less so. But as I began thinking about this challenge and the task, what occurred to me was it's not really about news, but more about journalism. News is just a commodity, it's information. But journalism is really the analysis and investigation and considered thought that really holds everything together. And in a world gone mad, this is really what matters. And interestingly, it seems that I'm not just the one that thinks that. And this is reflected really in what we're seeing in terms of people's relationship with media as well. So for the first time ever, we've seen a decrease in news consumption on social channels. And trust in platforms is also on the decrease, according to Edelman. But what we have seen in converse is that there is an upsurge in trust in journalism, perhaps heralding the new era of the return of the experts. So in our connected world, where news is constant, we really need the lighthouse effect of news brands to hold everything together, to guide us as we navigate these stormy seas. And the role of news brands will be, with my media hat on, to enable us to May I start again? So, with my media hat on, Newswork's own research has in fact demonstrated the power of advertising that can be achieved in trusted environments. And 75% of people told the IAB that they would only trust news that appeared when it didn't appear next to fake news content. So how do news brands nurture this trusted relationship? There are some key elements to trust. Integrity. Stop using clickbaity native formats and sensationalist headlines. The metamorphosis of the Huffington Post is a great example of how that can be achieved. Reliability. Improve cross-platform experiences and really think about how journalism can be delivered in social formats without compromising the integrity of the journalism itself. Competence. Demonstrate the use of fact checkers and trust indicators. And communication. Shift the digital focus from short-term metrics such as impressions and views and consider longer-term effectiveness measures such as ROI and brand awareness. And don't just take my word for it. Theresa May also has it on her agenda, and there's a review that's launching the results will come out in January, when we will see really perhaps the change in how news moves forwards and the support of journalism. So the future for me is the return to journalism. It's a mixture of old and new. Keeping the brave and rigorous reporting that we've seen of the past, but with a new face of innovative delivery across platforms and without compromise.
Thank you. So, what did you find the hardest challenge when you were thinking about that?
I think for me, it was not going straight for fake news, or not going straight for echo chamber, or all these other things that I think are bubbling on the surface at the moment, the kind of topics of the moment, and thinking beyond that and how that will happen in the future and what will happen later on.
Cool, fascinating. Nik, over to you.
I am going to do 3 minutes from fangs to fashion via Jeremy Corden and webbing rings in the space of 3 minutes. So in some ways, the future's fairly obvious, right? All of us are trying to build communities around content and then monetize them. The challenge that we've all got to face up to and that news brands have got to articulate a solution to is how you do that in the face of a fairly existential threat of a handful of brands that have got a bottomless pit of money and a seeming ability to scale communities at will, gobble up data and add revenues in the process. But what I want to put to my kind of viewpoint today is that news brands plugged into the digital economy, using the things that have made them brilliant through their heritage, are actually incredibly well placed to create a platform environment that is the most forward-facing in terms of its sociability, most forward in terms of content focus, has the most diversified revenue streams, and also creates the best experience from a consumer point of view anywhere in market. And what all of this comes down to is community. Newsworks have made a point last time that we all saw them in terms of focusing on how community increasingly is becoming more important for bringing people together in what feels like a very divided time. So things such as shared values, culture, tastes, and desire to share experiences all matter more now in some ways than they ever have done. The digital economy's made that in some ways more fractious than it used to be, so it's not so much about localized lines anymore as much more nuanced kind of depth of experiences. But that fundamentally plays into news brands' hands. They've always stood for community based on something much more than just where you live. They've stood for having purpose of community. And that's something that's becoming much, much more a bigger focal point of how they're winning and have potential to thrive and succeed further forward. Fundamentally, their purpose comes down to three things, right? And that is people, passions, and politics. And within those, they have a depth of relationship with their audiences that if you can find a way to kind of have permission to lead content experiences and the desire to engage communities on a different level, you have potential to monetize that in very different ways also. Just to give you a few examples of what I'm talking about. At the moment, The Guardian is delivering somewhere in the region of 15,000 new members into its Soulmates community every week. Now that's happening with around 80% of those people coming based on they believe it is the best way of meeting somebody who is most like them and most likely to be the future partner that they end up marrying. That is incredible. Mail Online, another one, really interesting. The community there, Jo was up earlier talking about what she's going to be doing with You Magazine. They have around £3 billion a year that their audience spend on fashion. We think somewhere in the region of £40 million spent directly through the Fashion Finder tool. If we look to The Telegraph, they're now one of the largest travel sites anywhere in the world. Again, building an audience of community who believe that they're sharing into things that are probably similar to people with similar tastes to them. Mirror, equally, fascinating look at how politics and communities can be mobilised to create real political change, such as Max's Law and the organ donations and how that's changed. What this also means, to bring it all to a close, is that they have permission, more active permission than that you can possibly get with an algorithm, in terms of their permission to cross-sell us experiences, to give us new sorts of content and to lead our content journeys in a way that is permissible. Where that could take us, I think, is potential game change. Quite recently, my esteemed colleague in the audience, Charles, and I very nearly came close to getting a new travel format that was a TV-style format delivered exclusively, hosted, promoted, and delivered through a news brand. That would have been something that we all believed was going to guarantee, would have driven viewing. The paper were willing to underwrite it. That's absolute game change if we can start to get that. If you take the logic a little bit further forward, why would you not, with a fashion community as large, as thriving, and as monetizable as that of Mail Online, why would they not be the next place for a format producer to take the next large fashion format, such as American Next Top Model, or whatever the next one of those is, and deliver it through a news brand? That's my view.
Where did you find the big challenge, the hardest challenge, rather?
I don't think it's that dissimilar to anyone else, but how you make sense of something that's fundamentally this complicated, pull it all apart and then pull it back together in what you then told us about a week ago is 3 minutes.
That's not true, we told them minutes ago.
Was challenging.
Fair enough. To wrap up, we have Emma.
Okay. Right, who has kids in the audience? Who has kids? Brilliant. So when they were young, didn't you just love story time? Best part of my day, going up to bed, getting the book out, reading to my son. But we got stuck into a bit of a routine that was about, it's always mummy's turn, it's always mummy's turn. Hey kid, there's 2 parents in this household, what about dad? Get him up for story time. The only way I could change that was to buy a different book. Bought a book, Bob the Builder, The Treasury of Bob the Builder. Brilliant, great, I'd highly recommend it if you've got younger children. What was special about that book? Well, when Daddy read that book, he did the voices. He did the voices. There's a character called Spud, and Spud talks like this. And when Dad did the voices, Adam loved the voices. The voices were brilliant. Adam wasn't engaged with Dad, he was engaged with Dad's voices that he was doing for Spud and for Bob and for all of the characters in Bob the Builder. 10 years later, voices are more important than just at story time. And if news brands and journalism is going to stay relevant in a world of Google and Alexa and Siri, then they have to find their voice. What does the Mail sound like? Is it different to the Metro? What does the brilliant sports journalists in the Telegraph, what do they sound like? Are they their own voice, or are they somebody else's voice? What is the right, trusted voice for your journalism? Voice will be hugely important in the world of print journalism, and those who spend their time getting it right now are going to be the winners. To show you what I mean, everybody close your eyes. If we could dim the lights, that would be great. And just have a listen.
Listening to me, you can tell. You know, you can tell right away that I'm a bloke, right? And you're starting to form an opinion of me just by hearing the sound of my voice.
Now you're starting to get an idea of me, bruv. Yeah? Yeah? And in your mind will put me in clothes, yeah? You listen to the sound of my voice, bruv. So is it my voice what puts me in those, yeah? See, you start to size me up.
By listening to the way that I speak. So hearing my vowels and my consonants informs you of what I eat, yes? And you're going to add pounds and pounds and pounds to my waistline, more and more, so that I get fatter and fatter and fatter and more asthmatic. It's harder to breathe when you're this size and this age. With it, you know, as you get older and older. But I can knock back the years of my life as you make an assumption about my diet, my BMI, and my new young lady wife. And you'll have a pretty good idea about my family, my upbringing, and the schools that I attended as a young man. And you'll probably have quite a good stab at my line of work and the smartphone I use. And you'll know, just by listening to me, the kind of mood I'm in.
So, how evocative and mind-bending was that? Words mean more than what is set down on paper. It takes a human voice to infuse them with deeper meaning. For me, the future of news brands, the future of journalism will absolutely not only be about the award-winning journalism that goes on in the written word, but how this is spoken. Work out your brand voice now and your future fit. Thank you very much.
You know the question by
I know
now.
the question. So for me, this was two things. People who know me know I have to stay authentic to me and what I believe and what I do. So getting a twist on something that could get me tied up in digital algorithms and things like that, it wouldn't be authentic coming from me. So for me, it was keeping the authenticity. And the second thing was making sure I could wear my red boots.
For which I'm very grateful, because I love them. Okay, voting pads at the ready. A for John, B for Laura, C for Nick, D for Emma. And the answer is D.
Thank you.
Well done then. Not that there is a winner. Brilliant, thank you.